Hello everyone, welcome to the round 24 trade targets and preview live stream. Just needed to do a couple of practice runs before I did that opening because it's been a couple of weeks, as some of you obviously would have noticed. I've been away on holiday, so yeah, apologies for the lack of content over the last 2 weeks. I did take my laptop, had all good intentions to do videos and whatnot, but yeah, internet was a bit spotty over there and I was just having too much fun. So I thought I'll give myself the break. But yeah, we're back. Good to see a lot of you in the stream already. Asking how was my holiday? How was Tanzania? Yeah, Tanzania was pretty incredible. So I did a safari holiday for anyone who wasn't aware. Took lots of great pictures. Someone actually asked if I could show pictures on the slides. I forgot to add them, but you can see some pictures on my phone potentially. Here's a nice alpha male lion that we took a great photo of. What else we got? We got some big boy lion here, looking straight at the camera. This was a bit scary, seeing him about 5 meters away. Saw a cheetah, the cheetah cub, very, very cute. Actually my favorite animal. I'm actually a big animal person. I love animals and stuff. So I had a great time on holiday. But yes, it was really good, but it's good to be back as well, recording content, talking SuperCoach. That's what we're here for. It's not Aman Talk Safari, it's Aman Talk SuperCoach. But yeah, Tanzania was amazing. Good to say that I've ticked off another continent off the list of countries and whatnot, list of continents and countries. So yeah, really, really good. Freshest haircut. YouTube's freshest haircut is back. How was the holiday? Yep, very good. Been struggling without you. Yeah, it was kind of bad with the last 2 weeks. There was lots of stuff on like Nico Hines, SJ and everything, and kind of hard to not be able to give my opinion and stuff. This week doesn't seem to be as crazy in terms of TLT and whatnot, so I mentioned it on the top of the stream in the chat. I'll try to spend more time in the stream, I think, answering questions. I think there's probably, in my opinion, a few less things to talk about and discuss, so yeah, we'll try to get onto some, maybe more of your questions today. So you spend a bit of time on your hair, I see, showing off. The hair, nothing done to the hair in 2 weeks. Just let it grow, no maintenance at all. Just all natural. But yeah, thank you to Azza saying you're back. Just in case, finally, Jason Yang, Roger Duckling, Davey K, Darren. Yeah, really appreciate you guys showing the love for me in the chat. But let's get into it. You might be interested in how I'm going SuperCoach wise. So if you don't follow me on Twitter, oops, wrong screen. There you go. You would have seen not last week, but the week before last. I had a shocker when I didn't own Cleary or Grant, who went absolutely huge. I didn't own Alex Johnson, who had 100. And so I dropped from like 4,500 to like 6,300 or something, 6,400. It was a pretty big drop. But last week was good. So I was happy enough to get a bit of a bounce back last week, 14.54. Couple of trade-ins worked. I've brought in Brian To'o 2 weeks ago for Billy Smith. Billy Smith has actually scored well, but Brian To'o has been good too, so at least I haven't really lost points in that trade, and he's obviously the most traded in player this week as well. Brought in Dallin Boteni-Zelezniak last week, he scored 67. A little bit concerned with him without Nico Klukstad this week and potentially for longer. We will discuss Nico Klukstad. But yeah, I think some of the guys who I don't own, not going huge, like Cleary got 100, but Hines and SJ, who I do own, both equaled and outscored him, and I looped SJ last week. Harry Grant didn't kill me last week, so last week just worked out a little bit better for me, where some of those guys who I don't know didn't absolutely kill me, and I had a couple of guys just do well for me, like To'o did well. SJ was probably the big one as well. I had a guy like Madison who scored like 80 plus, so I had a few good contributors. So 5,400, 2 trades and about 240k in the bank. So we'll try to get into what I'll looking to do this week. Initial thought, to be honest, was to hold trades, but thinking with a lot of money in the bank and Nico Klukstad out, maybe it's an opportunity to just kind of maybe be aggressive. But yeah, we'll get into all that good stuff. Dylan Edwards to sell. Yep, we'll definitely discuss Dylan Edwards. There was a few questions about him coming through on Twitter. But yeah, we'll get into all that good stuff. First thing I just wanted to quickly look at, which I like doing, is we only got 4 weeks left. So just wanted to take a look at the run home draw. Who are the teams to target? Maybe, if you are looking to pot up, maybe in your head to head, for example, you're looking at teams for, the next 3 weeks specifically for your finals. Who are the teams to be targeting? No surprise that the Warriors come out on top on my sorting, given you got West Tigers. It's labelled as an away game, but it's in New Zealand. Then you've got Manly at home, Dragons at home, and then Dolphins away. Like, the run is fantastic. We've been talking about it for a long time. Same as Newcastle in third. Ponga, Marzu, Dan Gagai, even pods like Dom Young. Not Bradman Best, he's out this week with a minor issue. Should be back next week. They're looking really good, lots of home games, and then the final games against the Dragons. Roosters have actually come up in my list, so Joey Manu is one of the more top 10 traded in players this week, after being one of the top 10, I think, most traded out last week. So he could be a nice little option for you. Maybe a pod like a Dan Tupou, if people are looking at pod center wings, as a bit of a point of difference for your head-to-head. Dolphins this week is not a bad matchup. Para and West Tigers and Rabbitohs, who not looking the best recently as well. So yeah, a few things to be looking at there. And then if you go to the bottom, you've got Parramatta, Broncos, who are in really good form. Roosters is probably decent at home. Then it's Penrith, who we know are the best defense by a long shot. And then round 27 bye. Dragons, not really many players to be thinking about either. But yeah, I think there's a few relevant teams. Panthers I've got at kind of middle of the table, but we know how good the team is that the draw doesn't really matter. So you look at Manly, Titans, Parramatta and Cowboys, and you think that's a pretty good run. The biggest question I think with Panthers players is just, do we think that they'll get rested in round 27? Because historically they've done that. I haven't got the actual NRL table in front of me, but I think if they've sewn up number one spot, or if they've just sewn up top two to get that home final or top four, which top four I'm pretty sure they'll get, they'll probably come first anyway, potentially a risk that they get rested in the last round. So something to maybe just keep in mind, maybe if you're loading up on Panthers players, maybe give yourself, if you can, a trade to maybe do some moves in that last week. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say about the draw. We'll get into some of the main content stuff, because I do want to try to spend more time on the stream, I think, taking some of your questions. Joshua, I just seen yours about the best pod. Let me know if you have a position in mind, because that's pretty broad. If you have a position in mind, maybe I can think about that a little bit more. But yeah, let me know if you have a specific position in mind. So I've got this slide on halfbacks for the run home. To be honest, I think now at the point where, given the last 2 weeks, obviously wasn't making content, but there was a lot of discussion about Hines to SJ, Hines to Cleary and whatnot. I think now, if you're at the point where I don't think it's really a topic where if you have two of the three of Hines, Cleary, SJ, I think you just run with those two that you have at this point and don't worry about doing the trades between them, because I've got the draw below sorted in best to worst, so SJ's draw is the best, but Sharks have got the Titans at home this week. We know the Panthers run is good as well. I'd probably prefer Cleary and SJ, but Hines is still obviously good, scored 100 last week against the Rabbitohs, so we just again showed kind of what he's capable of. So I think the question with halfbacks is more about the others. If you own like a Moses, for example, I think Moses to Cleary, I think is the second most popular trade so far that I can see on NRL SuperCoach. Just gonna have a quick look at that. Yeah, so Moses to Cleary is the second most popular trade, followed by Moses to SJ, which I think is a perfectly fine trade to do, just to cover that off very quickly. Moses scored quite poor last week, or fairly low. He's got 100 break even, and it's a tougher matchup as well against the Broncos away. I think this week you want to have one of Cleary or Hines or SJ. Probably Cleary would be the one who I'd prefer the most. One thing with SJ, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in Captaincy, is SJ's got a really good matchup against the Tigers, and it is at home, but it's at 5:30, I think, on Saturday. That's 5:30 like AE, Australian Eastern Time. That'll be 7:30 in New Zealand, so it'll be an evening game, and it could be wet, could be cold. We've seen that the Warriors can potentially not be as fruitful, I guess, in poorer or wetter conditions. So that's just something to think about with SJ. If you are looking at moving to him this week, I do think he's a better option than Moses for the run home, but just maybe keep that in mind with your expectations around SJ. And if you're looking to bring him in as a captain or vice captain, if it's a wetter game, potentially there's a risk that he doesn't perform as well as say what he did last week. But Moses to Cleary I think is a really great trade this week. I think Manly's a good matchup for sure, and Cleary's just looking good. Was really, really good last week. It's great kicking game and whatnot. One thing about being on holiday, I'm seeing a couple of comments still about that. The problem with being on holidays, it's very hard to watch games. So luckily Emirates shows you live TV. So if you're flying at the right time, you can actually watch the games live while you're flying, which is pretty cool. So I was able to catch some highlights of the Panthers Melbourne game, which is incredible. Pretty much watched half of I think it was the Eels Dragons game as well. And actually watching some FIFA Women's World Cup too, which is cool. But yeah, Moses Cleary I think is a perfectly good trade in. I've got Hughes and Cherry Evans up here on this screen as well. The only reason I've got them is just if you're really chasing in terms of pods. One thing I like with Cherry Evans is not not this week or next week with Panthers and Warriors, but last 2 weeks, Bulldogs and West Tigers. Let's say you're in the position where you've got Moses and you've got like one trade. Let's say you've got Moses and you've got like one trade left, and you've only got like say 50k in the bank. So you can't go Moses to Cleary, SJ, or Hines. Just maybe hold that in your pocket, because round 26, when Parramatta have Penrith, a swap to Cherry Evans, you might probably be able to afford that. Cherry Evans, those last 2 games are really good. Don't expect him to get rested. He could just be like a super pod. I have no idea what Cherry Evans' ownership is, but just keep that in mind. If you're potentially running really low on trades, and you can't afford to go like the top 3 halfbacks, someone like Cherry Evans could just be a nice little pod to consider. But I think that's probably all I'm going to spend on the halfbacks. I think the trades themselves are pretty self-explanatory. I think Moses to Cleary, followed by Moses to SJ, I think are perfectly good trade-ins that you could do for the run home. So I think the main thing I wanted to get into this week was probably around Charnze Nicoll-Klokstad and the centres in general. So he is the most traded out player by far at this stage. So CNK, 2,000 trades out. 2,900. So basically 3,000 trades out, followed by Val, who's at 1,200. So the top 2 traded out players are centres. So I thought it'd be good just to spend a bit more time looking at some of the more relevant centering options that you might want to consider as trade-ins. And centering is a decent position to look for some pods as well. So I've tried to present a few pods as here as well. So Josh, you're asking center wing or fullback, so that's good. Look, I think in terms of a pod center wing, I know Gagai was popular last week, and he is, I think, in the top 10 most traded in. No, he's actually not. So I'm going to have a quick look at this. Where does he sit currently in terms of the top 10 trades in? So round ownership change. Gagai is currently 13 most traded in player. He's got ownership of 3.8%, and he's only been brought in by 0.3. So as it stands, he's only 4% owned still. Really good matchup as well to the Bulldogs. We spoke about the Newcastle draw. It's really good. I've got them ranked 3rd. I think Gagai's a really good pod because he banged out 70 last week. He's just been averaging 72 in terms of my expected points. If you look at number of games remaining and their 5-round average, I've got him 3rd behind just To'o and Marzu, and it's a close 3rd as well. Marzu is much higher owned, so I think Gagai could be a good option there. If you want to go really pod and I think a bit more risky in terms of the ceiling, his winger, Dom Young, I think is potentially an option. You just need to be mindful that, with Dom Young, he can throw in those occasional low scores. Like last time they versus the Bulldogs and they scored 66 points, I think he scored 18. You just need to be willing to stomach that, but I have a feeling he's less owned than Gagai. I prefer Gagai for a little bit more money, but he, I think, is still a really good pod as a trade-in, especially in the center wing. Another one to consider is Dan Tupou, who's got a 5-round average of 71. I can't tell you what his ownership is. I'll have a quick look for it here, but I have a feeling that he's also pretty low in terms of ownership. He's 588k, 2% of teams. Pretty good run home as well with the Dolphins, Parramatta, West Tigers, and then the Rabbitohs, and he's scoring tries. So I think someone like a Tupou who's got a good base on him as well, could be a good trading option. Just on the center wings, on the next couple of slides as well, I've got a few more things about, where teams like to attack on the edges and also where teams are leaky as well. So do stay tuned for that. I'll probably spend more time on that too. Now, Isaac Tungo was someone I did originally have in this table, but he's been out. He's out again this week, not even named in the entire squad, so he's no potential for him to jump back into the squad. We haven't really heard, so I'm just seeing this question from you, Hamish, in terms of when he's going to be back. We haven't really heard anything, so the Panthers could just be playing it safe. They know that they're going to make the finals, and they want him to be ready for that. So, maybe he comes back next week. I'm sure that if he's available next week, he'll get selected, but we haven't heard anything on his prognosis, so yeah, kind of in the dark, I think, on that one. In terms of other options, so Manu, one of the more traded in players this week as well. I do like it for the run home too. I did toy with selling Manu last week, but in the end, I just thought, look, Manly's a good matchup. I'll keep him, and he repaid the faith, scored 97, which was really good. Other centering options, Nat Timoko, tough matchup this week with Melbourne, but then he does have the Bulldogs. Broncos Sharks isn't ideal, so it's probably not my favourite. Jermaine Sarko, not really a pod, but had a good score last week. Got decent draw with the Roosters, Tigers, Cowboys, and the Warriors. Dallin Watene-Zelezniak is still a pod as well. So He is, I believe, in the top 10 most. Yeah, he's the 8th most traded in player at the moment. Currently owned by 8.3, brought in by 0.5. So he'd be around, call it 9% ownership, which I think is still enough of a pod. He's below 10%. Does have the best draw, I think, out of any of these other guys. The only thing with Tenny Zalesniak is that he was really benefiting from Niko Klukstad. Like, we'll see. I'll quickly just jump to it now, but you look at where teams score their tries. The Warriors stand out, like, by far. Like, you look at the Warriors, 49% of their tries were scored on the right edge. That's just because of SJ, Niko Klukstad to DWZ. That's one of the reasons why I traded in DWZ last week as well. I thought, because I already had Niko Klukstad and SJ, I thought if I can stack all three of them with this really good run home, hopefully that's a good way to go up the rankings, because people may have one or two, but maybe not all three. With Niko Klukstad out, it doesn't give me a great confidence in DWZ, because I don't really know too much more about this guy that they've got coming in. Is it Torpiki? I can't pronounce his surname, unfortunately. He looks a good player, but whether he's going to be as good as Niko Klukstad at kind of nailing that sweep play remains to be seen. If it's a late game, potentially wet game, do they play towards more the middle, less on the edge, potentially? So DWZ, I think, he was a good trade in last week and looked at, but with this Niko Klukstad issue, it being his third concussion, on whether Niko Klukstad is a hold or a sell, NRL Physio has mentioned that players who historically have gotten 3 concussions within a short span of time in a season historically don't play out the rest of the season. Now, that might not be the case with CNK, but he's already out for this week. There's a good chance he misses next week as well, given that the Warriors might just want to rest him. And especially with the Warriors looking to play finals this season, I do think that there's a chance that maybe they just take the safe route with him. Maybe they just bring him back for like round 27, and they just want him to be good to go for the finals. So I think Niko Klukstad, he's at pretty good value, about 650 something K. He didn't lose too much either. So I think if you've got one trade, I'd probably hold Niko Klukstad, just in the case that if he does come back, it could be a pod, and let's say he comes back in 26. Let's say he misses even next week. Well, it's the Dragons and Dolphins. Like, it's still 2 really good matchups, and he could be lower owned, and it could be actually a really good pod for you if you're overall. If you're head-to-head, maybe you need to just bite the bullet and sell just to try to win your matchup this week, potentially. I haven't fully made up my mind. I think it comes down to also the depth cover you have at centre wing. I was hoping on Munro being listed this week. He's not been listed at this stage. And so, I really wanted to target that Dragons game. I might sell Niko Klukstad now if it looks like Munro won't play, just so I can try to field a better 17. I don't mind selling him because centre wing, there are a lot of good options out there, but my initial thought was to hold, just because it's a really good run of games that he could come back. But hopefully we get some more concrete news from the Warriors about his about when he's due to come back. So it's kind of a wait and see at this point. But initial instinct was to hold. But I think if you've got 3 or more trades, I think it's probably fine to sell him. 2, 50-50. I think 1, I'd probably look to hold him, just because something else worse could happen in your team. Cleary goes down or whatnot. Something could happen in a higher upside position that you just can't cover if you have no more trades left. In terms of other pod options, Campbell Graham, the only issue with him is that you just need to worry about, obviously, is that round 26 bye. Great matchup this week. The Dragons do concede a lot of points down their left side. Knights in round 25, it's probably not the easiest matchup now on paper. And then the Roosters in round 27 could be good. But Campbell Graham, I think the fact that he has that bye in round 26 kind of doesn't thrill me. I think you've got guys who've got potentially better draws and play 4 games instead. All right, I'm seeing if there's any questions about centre wings here from Alex. We've got, what trade would you do, AJ to Cleary or Manu to SJ? Just a price issue that I can't do AJ to SJ. If I had to do one of those 2 moves, Alex, it would probably be AJ to Cleary. I know AJ's got that good matchup this week, but I think that sounds like a better upgrade than Manu to SJ, just because Manu's draw is still pretty good. AJ's is good, to be fair, but like Cleary, AJ plays 1 less game than Manu, and Cleary could be really, really big this week. CNK to Manu from Roger Duckling. I think Manu is a decent trade in this week. So probably what I will do, so just keeping in mind the few more popular names. So let's think of like To'o, Marzu, Gagai, Manu, Tupou, maybe a Sarko, and a DWZ. Maybe some of the guys I'll think about. So I got this courtesy from SuperCoach Guns. Definitely follow him on Twitter if you don't already. Post some amazing stuff. I really like looking at his weekly try map, which I've just got on the screen. It's probably a little bit small to see, but yeah, it's really good just to see where teams are leaky around the park, and it really does help, I think, identify your better matchups that you can target for this week. So Brian To'o, most traded in player, there's a big reason for that. So if you look at this table that I've got to the right of me, if you're watching on screen, so I've got some of those players that we mentioned. Percentage is actually the percentage of tries scored by that team on that relevant player's edge. So for example, Brian To'o, 40%. That means the Panthers score 40% of their tries on the right edge, which I've got shown in this next slide here, where you can see I've got the Panthers, 40% on their right side. Do they score the tries? Middle, and also on the left edge. So I've just kind of separated that all for those key players, so that you can kind of see maybe for the matchups this week, if you're looking at a center wing, who's the one to go for. Marzu, you can see that the Knights definitely favour their left side, 43%. Gagai less so with 36%. Someone like a Tupou, the Roosters do favour their left side with 42% of tries being scored by them on the left side. Asako, if you're looking at him, obviously he's a big part of that. He's been very prolific this season. 44% of Dolphins tries are on the right side. DWZ, we already spoke about him, 49%. AJ, 45%. We know how good the Rabbitohs left edges, but also Graham, 42%. It probably just shows you that the Rabbitohs really score most of their tries out wide, not so much through the middle. And then in the next column, I've got matchup. So what that is that based on SuperCoach Gun's try map, if you look at the matchup that they have this week, that shows the number of tries that team concedes to that specific position. He's got it a little bit better presented than me, where he's actually got some colours to highlight this, but a really good one to look at. Again, Brian To'o, you look at Manly, they concede 17 tries to opposition right wingers, which is their worst spot in defence. So you can see someone like Brian To'o, Panthers 40% of the time are going to their right. It's a really good matchup on that right wing for To'o. Nickel Klukstad is out. That's why he's the most traded in player this week, and he's just scored a ton as well. Like, all the factors are there. I think To'o is probably the guy I'd prefer to go for. Just need to be bearing in mind that there's potentially that risk of a round 27 resting if that does happen, but I really like him for this week. Next week against the Titans is also very good as well. One of the reasons why I also went DWZ last week was I didn't just look at last week, but I looked at every week ahead. So if you think about the Warriors draw with DWZ, he's got Tigers this week, who have conceded 21 tries to their right wing, which is the most of any single position of any team. You're looking at this try map, like, it's pretty crazy. So very, very leaky on that left wing. Then next week, I think the Warriors have, who do they have next week? They've got Manly. So again, 17 tries at this point. So a very, very good matchup to target. Who do the Warriors have after that? They've got, is it Dragons? I want to say it's Dragons. It is the Dragons. And the Dragons concede 19 tries to their opposition right wingers. And then finally, it's the Dolphins, who are 18. I just looked at that and I thought, holy smokes, all those teams that the Warriors are coming up against are all leaking tries to opposition right wingers. This is when I thought, obviously Nickel Klukstad was fit. So I thought DWZ is the guy that I'm going to go for. So I think that type of analysis, if you're really 50-50, it's good to kind of look at what's coming up for these guys. And, potentially, if you can eye up any good matchups, it's another reason why, Campbell Graham could be a really good shout this week. You can see the Dragons, they're very leaky on their left edge. This is kind of stuff that I think if you've been watching the games, you can see it. It's just nice to have this all validated. So yeah, shout out to SuperCoach Guns for this. We'll talk about this as well when we discuss captaincy as well. But I've taken a couple of notes here. So yeah, Manly weak on the wings, To'o Cleary time, Titans weak through the middle. So one thing with the Titans is that they're actually not very leaky on their edges as much as they are actually in the middle. So you can see that column middle, 16 tries. So that would favour the guys like the dummy half, the fullbacks, the lock. So, someone like a Hines who could be playing around the middle, short balls to his bigger forwards, could do well this week. We've already mentioned the Dragons' weak left edge. I've written Graham and Munro, but I wrote that when I thought Munro would get named this week. DWZ versus the Tigers. Dolphins are very weak on the left edge. So, it's another reason why someone like a Manu, if you're again looking for a pod, Joseph Leaky, who's I still believe is goal kicking. He's also very cheap. I know people who out there have Dylan Edwards. You're probably thinking, can I maybe look to move off, go for someone a little bit cheaper? I think Leaky is around his price tag. And he's got a 5-round average of 65, just coming off an 84 as well. He's got a pretty good run home too, and he is goal kicking. So someone like a Leaky has a really good matchup this week. So I think if you've decided that Edwards for you is a sell, which is not an easy decision, this is something that you can maybe think about Leaky could actually be a really good option for this week. Finally, is the final thing I wanted to call out was Bulldogs, who have conceded a lot of tries again to middles and also to fullbacks. So someone like a KP could do really, really well this week. So a few things I wanted to call out there, but we'll refer back to this as well when discussing captaincy. But yeah, hopefully you all like that kind of a deep dive on the centre wing. Probably didn't fully answer who is maybe the best option to trade in. I think based on the matchup and the form of the Panthers, I do still think Toto is the best. If I had to go number 2, for more of a pod, and I do think they have a better draw, it is probably Gagai. Third would probably be Manu. If you don't own Manu and you want to tackle the Roosters, really good draw as well. And then fourth, I think you can maybe take a punt on like a, maybe like a probably. Oh, actually, sorry, I've missed DWZ. I do think I should probably I'll put DWZ above Manu because I do think that he just has that much better draw, and the Warriors just seem to be a team that maybe Nico Kluksard being out, maybe the new fullback comes in and just fits in like a glove, and the system still works. So I'll give DWZ a bit more credit. I'd probably still go Toto. I'd still probably go Gagai just above DWZ. I went DWZ because he was more of a pod last week. This week Gagai is actually more of a pod. So it'd be Toto, Gagai, DWZ, then probably Manu. That's kind of my top 4. I've excluded Marzu purely because I think he's already very highly owned. At this stage, if you don't own Marzu, maybe you can look to go elsewhere and maybe go like a Gagai instead. If you quickly look at maybe some of the matchups for Marzu, if you are thinking about that. So just taking a very quick look here. So Marzu has Bulldogs, Souths, Sharks, and Dragons. So, okay, Bulldogs to left wingers, only 10 tries, so it's definitely not the weakest spot in their team. Sharks only 10, Rabbitohs only 12, and also the Dragons 12. So still good matchups, but it's not like the weak spot in those respective teams. So it kind of looks like potentially maybe the right side could be better to target. So maybe someone like a Gagai could be an option over Marzu. Let's see, take a couple of questions here. So yeah, CNK to Manu. Yeah, so I think that's a decent move, Roger, but maybe consider some of those other options who I've got ranked above Manu. Cooler to Manu. I don't mind Cooler to Manu either. Manly, they've got nice 2 end games, but the next 2 weeks are pretty tough, I'd say, especially this week, Penrith. He's at a decent value of 547. Yeah, I don't mind cashing in and going for a Manu if you want, because it's a really good matchup this week. Other question is Jaden Campbell, 459k pod option. So I don't actually know even where Campbell is listed in the game. Let's have a quick look here. Jaden Campbell. So he's been named at fullback this week. He's a 5'8 fullback. So the issue with Jaden Campbell, I guess, is that as a 5'8 fullback, like probably maybe not in your 5'8. I'm assuming most people would maybe have like a KP Munster. Maybe fullback if you've got Latrell, and like myself, I've got like a Garrick CNK rotation happening there. I think Sharks is not the easiest matchup. They're pretty tight against opposition fullbacks. Only 4 tries against opposition fullbacks so far this season. Then he's got Penrith next week, Melbourne round 26. It's only really the Bulldogs in round 27. I just kind of think, yes, he's a pod, scored well last week, but I just see that Panthers matchup next week. He might do well this week, but I don't know. I feel like I'd rather pot up elsewhere. It doesn't feel like he's got the draw where you could say like, okay, he could be a sneaky option who, players who don't have trades can't jump on him. I don't know I don't know how well he'll score, especially with those tougher matchups. I don't love Campbell, to be honest, as a pod, but he is obviously a great player. He was really good last week as well against the Warriors, and Titans in general were really good, with only 12 players as well. So I know he scored 61 and 93 last 2 weeks, but yeah, he does have some games where, to be fair, if he's not playing full 80 minutes, so I'll give him that. But it's just that draw doesn't scream to be like kind of the easiest thing on paper. Why isn't Bellamy starting? Eli Katoa, I have no idea, to be honest. If I could get in the mind of Bellyache, I tell him it was great to see Ryan Pappenhausen back. Please bring him back soon. This is another thing I'm kind of toying with in terms of I've got lots of money in the bank. Is Ryan Pappenhausen potentially an option? 950k. He could be the pod of all pods, and imagine if he's back next week. I don't know when he's due to come back, but imagine if he was back next week against the Dragons, and he's goal kicking in Reggie's as well. Then he's got the Titans in round 26. Whew. Pappy could be on the menu. I'm more interested in Pappy, to be honest, Hamish, but yeah, with Eli Katoa, I'm not too sure what's happening there in terms of why he's not starting. All right, so that was my kind of centre wing deep dive. We'll go past this a little bit. I'll chat a little bit about fullbacks because I know Latrell, I think, is also one of the top 10 most traded in before we get into captaincy. And also, we've seen some questions about Dylan Edwards as well. I think Dylan Edwards is in the top 10 most traded out. Yeah, he's the 5th most traded out. Drinkwater is actually the 4th most traded out as well. Gutherson is the 8th most traded. So there's a few fullbacks being traded out this week, so it's probably worthwhile to chat about them. Look, Drinkwater out. He's on the bye this week, 952k. I'm assuming most people who are trading out Drinky are going to Latrell, who's got the Dragons this week. Yep, that's correct. That's the 6th most traded. That's the 6th most popular trade this week of Drinkwater to Latrell. I think it's a good move, to be honest, because you're getting equal number of games out of them. But I think you probably want to try to tackle the matchup, especially if you're a head-to-head player. I think it's a good move just to try to make sure you've got that guy who's got potential to go like 130 plus this week in Latrell. We're waiting for that bounce back from the Rabbitohs. Dragons, to be fair, have been improved, but it has to be sooner or later for the Bunnies if they want to try to cement that top 8 spot. So, yeah, for me, Latrell, Drinkwater to Latrell, I do like that move. And you also bank 230k. Like, you're actually getting some money out of that. So, like, Drinkwater's good, but the run home of Sharks, Dolphins, and Penrith, apart from that Dolphins game, I'd probably say that, Latrell's got a fair chance of matching, with Roosters, Dragons, and the Knights in the 3 games as well. If I look at the expected points of them, the only difference is about 15 points on expected points, but you've got a matchup this week that you can probably target a little bit better. So I think Drinkwater to Latrell I do like. Joshua CNK to Latrell, I think that's also a pretty good move. Like, it's hard for me to comment a little bit on Latrell because I couldn't watch that game last week against the Sharks, and I haven't had time to actually go back and watch the highlights. I might actually do that after this as well. Just so I haven't really been able to get a good gauge of Latrell's involvement. But just based on his scoring, he scored 74 in his first week back. He's just that kind of player who doesn't seem he needs to do much, and he can score well. I did also hear that Munro didn't have a great game, dropped a couple of balls. So I did hear that, if 1 or 2 of Latrell's passes to him stuck, better chance that Latrell gets another, try assist, line break assist, and we could be looking at 90 to 100 or even 120. And then I think if you looked at Latrell with 74 last week and then 120 or even 100, Dragons matchup already is tempting as it is, but there probably would have been even more of a clamour to get him in. I think if you've got Nickel Klukstad sitting there, I think you've got an option to go to Latrell. To me, that probably would be a fairly straightforward move. And I prefer a move like that to, say, like Tuamanu. I think Latrell is, obviously a genuine captain option this week as well. So I think the Drinkwater to Latrell move is good. Just looking again at some of the more popular trades. So, CNK to Latrell is the 8th most popular trade. I think that's pretty fair. Gutherson to Latrell, I agree with this one too. You free up about 120k. To Guther's credit, he's actually been really good even since I sold him. He scored 100, scored 80 last week. He's still putting out good scores, but I'm just looking at this run home now. Broncos have been really good. Penrith in round 26. Roosters could be fine before the bye in round 27. I prefer Latrell's draw. If you're really low on trades, I don't think it's the worst thing just to keep Gutherson, because I think this week could be tough, but Roosters, I think he could be fine for like a 70 plus. But I think if you've got like maybe 3 trades, 2 trades even, I wouldn't mind doing Gutherson to Latrell, because I definitely would prefer Latrell this week. So I think that's another move I'd be okay doing. Now, Dylan Edwards is a bit more tricky because, he's at much less value, 533k. You need about 200k to get up to Latrell. Obviously, if you've got that money in the bank, I think that's a move that you'd probably do. But if you don't, whether or not you hold him, he's got Manly this week, and this is the team that he scored 160 against earlier this season. So you do need to keep that in mind as well, that he has gone big against Manly. Really disappointing 5-round and 3-round average, 47, 43. Just with the Panthers being so good, he's probably just had to do less. And it seems as though when Cleary was out of the team, it was actually better for him. And it seems as though he doesn't need to be that kind of more involved playmaker. So I think with Edwards, it's a good matchup this week with Manly, but we've kind of already seen that, with Cleary back, potentially his output is reduced. Last 2 weeks, Melbourne and Sharks, they're not the easiest opposition. So my gut, to be honest, would tell me that if I was if I was an Edwards owner and I could get to Latrell, I would probably do that move if I could. In terms of options who are around his price, I've mentioned Leaky, who could be potentially a pod to go for, who's I think's got probably a better chance of outscoring him. He's goal kicking, and there is a chance that Edwards, who I don't think has had a rest all season long. I'm looking through it here. He's only had rest when the Panthers have had the bye. I'd say he's maybe a fair chance of getting a rest in round 27. So if you're looking at it again where he maybe misses one game, someone like Leaky, I don't see why the Roosters would rest players. They've got nothing really to play for now at this stage. I can kind of see Edwards, and I can see the appeal in selling him. In terms of players around him who are kind of available at his price, I'm just going to do a quick filter on the centre wing fullback. While I do that, guys, if you are enjoying the stream, do please give it a like as well. It really does put a smile on my face, and I appreciate it. So if you're looking around the 500k for like centre wings and fullbacks, assuming that's the kind of area you're going to, not a whole heap of options, if I'm being totally honest. Maybe a Mulatalo if you're going for a bit of a pod. Mulatalo's 14% owned, but I imagine a lot of those are kind of zombie teams. Good matchup this week against the Titans. He could score well. And the Sharks could be higher on confidence as well after that pretty good win against the Bunnies. Looking elsewhere, someone mentioned Jaden Campbell, but I don't really love that draw. To be honest, there's not a whole heap of options who I like. Like, I know Nofaluma scored 71 last week, but it's a tough matchup against the Warriors. So Billy Smith, maybe Billy Smith at 472k if you want to jump back on Billy Smith. He's actually had a couple of good scores. Scored 100 last week, 470k. He's got a 5-round average of 60. I only just sold Billy Smith the last couple of weeks, and he's actually been decent since I sold him. He scored 56 and 100. So, if you look at the last 4 weeks, it's a 70 and a 32, a 56 and a 100. He's actually had more good scores than bad in the last 4 weeks. Maybe Billy Smith, but maybe Sully is more of the pod if you want to go down that way. But I'll be interested to see who you guys think are potentially some good pod options to consider. Good to see you back in business, my man. Thank you. Appreciate that a lot, Mitchell. Edward to a centering Nuff, already have Latrell, and upgrade a Moan to Munster from Fangnado. So you'd be nuffing out Edwards, but that lets you get Munster. Yeah, I don't mind that. Munster is, scored. It didn't score amazing last week, but it was Penrith, and they're just a ridiculously scary defense. Like, it's unbelievable how good their defense is. Canberra this week is a good matchup at home. Although, to be fair, Canberra are a bit of a bogey team for Melbourne. For whatever reason, they seem to be always able to beat them. Then you've got the Dragons in round 24, Titans in round 26. I think those are good matchups there where I like if you can switch Edwards to Munster, I think, by doing enough. If you're comfortable, obviously, with the trades remaining, I think it's a pretty fair move because I do think Munster, I'd much rather have Munster for the run home than deal Edwards at this point. Matt Tomoko from Tool Pro. Yeah, so I did have him earlier in my centre wing list. The only issue with Tomoko, I think, is just the draw. It's not fantastic. Last week was good against Tigers. He scored 64. Melbourne this week is a bit tough, although I think he scored well against them earlier this season. Let me have a look. No, they haven't played Melbourne yet this season so far, but he had a bit of it's just a weird one. He had a bit of a run earlier in the season, then he kind of just cooled off, so it's a bit hard to maybe pick when is the time to jump on him. Bulldogs next week could be good. It's a home game, although Canberra at home haven't always been the best either, so 564k, to be perfectly honest, I'd actually look at one of the Roosters players as a bit of a pod, maybe like a Sully who's goal kicking. I wouldn't mind taking a leap of faith more on him over someone like a Timoko. Very quickly on Tedesco, I'll just mention him. I imagine a lot of people have sold him already for Latrell, but if you do have still Teddy, I think it's perfectly fine to hold for this run home. Like, it's a pretty good draw with the Dolphins, Parramatta and West Tigers, and then the Bunnies in round 27. I think at this stage, I'm assuming low on trades. He's got a 5-round average of 72, 3-round of 80. Maybe just someone to consider as, again, if you're making moves, selling drink order, let's say you already own Latrell, Teddy's 200k cheaper, could be a bit of a pod for you as well. So just keep him in mind as well. Could be a nice little pod for the run home. I don't want to force too many Roosters players on you all. I'm not using my bias or anything. I don't think we've been very good at all this season, but they do have a pretty decent run of games coming up. And I kind of feel like maybe with nothing to play for, they just kind of loosen the shackles a little bit. All right. So I think the last thing I wanted to touch on today was captaincy. So obviously a very big discussion point this week is captaincy because we've got so many good options this week. I think the 5 main ones are Cleary, Hines, Latrell, SJ, and Ponga. So just to explain what's going on screen, there's a lot of stuff happening here. So I've just put the opposition for this week, and I've noted as well for Latrell and for SJ that their games are, it's a home game for Latrell, but it's actually being played in Cairns, I believe, Barlow Park. SJ's is an away game, but it's in New Zealand, so it's effectively a home game. So that's a couple of things I wanted to mention there. I've got the average rank in terms of the position of conceding points. So for example, if you look at Cleary, who I've got as 9th, Manly are the 9th worst at conceding points to opposition halfbacks. If you look at someone like Tedesco, Dolphins actually concede the most points on average to fullbacks. So someone like Teddy's got a good matchup this week. And then what I wanted to add in this week as well were just some percentages on the vice captaincy and captaincy across the top 5% and also the top 1%. I'm assuming that's kind of the rankings that hopefully the majority of you guys are in, those upper echelons, and it's probably more of the engaged players that I think you want to be seeing what are the trends happening there. So by far, Cleary is standing out as the most popular vice captain, 48% in the top 5%, 49% in the top 1%, and I pulled these numbers as of about 8 o'clock, so it's only about 45 minutes ago. So Cleary is standing out by far as the biggest vice captaincy option this week, which I agree, because Manly have conceded a lot of points to opposition halfbacks. We've spoken about the weakness of the Manly side being their left edge defense, which was where Cleary plays. I can just see him racking up a lot of points this week, and I don't own him. I won't be owning Cleary this week, and it scares me to living death. I think there's a very good chance he scores like 120 this week or something crazy like that. So Cleary, I think the numbers make sense to me, why he's such a high VC. The captaincy, I don't think I'd straight captain Cleary. Only reason being is just that it's a Thursday game and it's a night game. I just kind of feel like captaincy seems to be better in those day games where drier track, more ball movement. Cleary this could kind of be the game where, Panthers is just in cruise control. Maybe they go up it kind of happened against Melbourne. They were up 20 something points to 6 at halftime, and they just needed to just kind of grind the game down. They didn't need to go put on a cricket score. So you can see maybe Cleary kind of running the show in the first half, gets to 85, 90, and then cools off and maybe gets 100, which is fine. You'd obviously take 100 points as your captain, but if you're trying to chase and go for that big 150, maybe you won't get that for Cleary. So I think a VC is a good play, but I don't think I'd actually straight captain Cleary in my opinion, but maybe that's just me trying to speak myself and being more comfortable in the fact that I won't own him this week. Just a couple of questions coming in. I'll just get through the captaincy section and then we'll get to some of your questions a bit more. Nico Hines. So spoke about it a little bit before with the Titans, pretty weak through the middle. He's currently 8% VC'd in top 5% and 11% in the top 1%. So nowhere near as high as someone like a Cleary. I really like Hines as a VC option for this week because it's a 6 o'clock game, I think, on the Friday. So it's an evening game, but it's a home game. And I think at home, Hines is averages 100 plus. He's very, very consistent in getting tons playing at home. Titans won't have AJ Brimson. Tino does come back for them, who's obviously we haven't mentioned yet either, but he will be back this week. But Titans have been somewhat leaky as well against opposition halfbacks. So to be honest, if you're a Cleary Hines combo owner, I'd probably VC Cleary. But if you're looking to chase rank, I'd probably go a little bit lower owned and go for a Hines. I've got a gut feeling that Hines I think has better potential to outscore Cleary this week. I kind of see Cleary going between 90 to 120, which is good. I kind of see Hines though going between 80 to 150. I kind of feel like Hines this week has that better potential to go that 150 plus this week compared to Cleary, in my opinion. That's just kind of more of a gut feel. I like that it's a home game as well. And just with Manly, I know they've been leaky, but they do sometimes just turn up at home and they just can kind of somehow put in these good performances. So maybe there's a chance that they do that this week. So for me, Hines, I kind of like him a little bit more as a VC option. I still wouldn't straight captain him either. Again, it's just being an evening game. I'll talk about the elephant in the room for next in terms of KP. 76% captained in the top 5 and 78% in the top 1%. So he's the overwhelming majority favourite for captaincy this week, which I agree with. It's a home game against the Bulldogs. We saw him score 180 against them last time out, which I don't think he'll repeat because I think the Bulldogs have been a little bit better and they've got some more players coming back. But I just think the form of Newcastle, the form of Ponga, the goal kicking, the fact it's a 4 o'clock Sunday game, and I did check the weather for Newcastle. It's about 18 degrees and sunshine. I can just see it being a game where Ponga could easily go 130 or something like that. So for me, Ponga makes sense as the most popular captain this week. If I had to vice captain Loop this week, so for me personally, I'm probably looking at VC Hines. I think Hines would need to go probably 135, 140 for me to consider a Loop. Any less, say a 120, I probably would maybe just be tempted to stick with Ponga. And obviously it comes down to as well who's your AE, auto emergency score, that you'll get off the bench this week. I think if again for some of the reasons I mentioned with SJ and the fact that it's a night game in New Zealand, and if it's a wet game either as well, this is maybe an opportunity where, his VC is kind of higher than Hines at 15% and 14%. I kind of look at that as an opportunity where if you're a Hines SJ owner like myself, I'm looking at that thinking Hines, I think, has got a better ceiling this week if the conditions are correct, and also I think can outscore SJ this week. So I'm kind of looking at Hines over SJ as my preferred VC. And I wouldn't captain SJ, I think, for that reason as well, about it being potentially a wet game. Just Latrell, I think, is the one who stands out. I think if you're really pod chasing, he seems to be the one who's kind of not flying under the radar, but he is kind of across the board the lower percentage. So only 5 and 6% vice captain in the top 5 and 1%, and only 6% captained in both of those respective categories as well. You could compare that to everyone else who has at least one of the other scores being around that 8 or higher percent. Latrell's definitely flying under the radar in that sense, and it's a good opposition. The Dragons have been very leaky historically this season, 5th worst at defending opposition fullbacks. Just because of the way that the Bunnies have been playing, I know Latrell can go big, but I've just got more confidence, I think, in both Hines and Ponga this week. So I'm personally not going to go, even though my rank probably suggests that I should pod chase a little bit and go a little bit more of the pod route. I just don't have it in me, I think, at this point to straight captain Latrell. I'm not seeing enough out of the Rabbitohs, I think. I'm seeing a lot out of the Knights, so I'd rather just straight captain Ponga, and I think I'd prefer Hines this week as well. I just view him as a bit more solid, and it's probably less risky of giving you a lower score, I think. So I think for me, Latrell probably, again, doesn't stand out. And I also think the Dragons can be a team that can just kind of maybe be a little bit awkward and maybe actually turn up and maybe give the Rabbitohs a bit of a challenge. It is a good away game. It's an away game in Cairns, so it'd probably be sunny conditions there, I imagine. But yeah, just for me, my gut's not telling me that Latrell's probably the guy to go for. But I think if you're really pod chasing out there, let's say, for example, head to head, I think given the opposition stats of the Dragons, the fact that he was close to going well last week, apparently, I like Latrell potentially from that perspective. But it's hard to go against Ponga, in my opinion, with those really high stats. Let me know in the chat, though, if you guys have any different options that you're considering. I've got Teddy listed there as well, who, on paper actually has the best matchup in terms of the position. Dolphins are the worst at defending opposition fullbacks, but he's currently not captained by anyone in the top 1 or 5%, and only VC'd by 1 or 2%. So he's probably the most pod that you can go, but I imagine a lot of people already don't own Teddy. So Fang Knight is asking, what about Manu captain as a pod? VC AFB. The only issue with VC AFB is I just don't feel like he's got that big 140 that you'd look for in a VC to loot. I don't mind the Manu captaincy shout. It's a good matchup going up against the weaker side of the Dolphins. But again, just with captaincy this week, I think with so many good options around, like we talk about Cleary, Hines, Latrell, SJ, Ponga, they're all goal kickers. So they're guys who, they can get to 100, but then if their team just scores a huge amount of points, well, there's a good chance that they're involved. But they can just add like 35, 40 points. Just from goal kicking. It's so underrated how high that can make the ceiling of these guys. Someone like a Manu had a great game last week, but scored 97. It's only when he was playing at fullback where we know he's an absolute beast that he did that massive 191 or like get those 150s. I just think playing at center, I just don't see him getting those really big scores. So he's definitely a pod, but to me it just doesn't feel like a week where I think you need to overthink the captaincy. I think you can just go for one of those 5 guys. My preference is Ponga, followed probably by Nico, then Cleary, then Latrell, then SJ. That's kind of my ranking of, I think, the best captain options this week. I feel like I just want to chase someone who's like a goal kicker this week. That's just my opinion anyway. All right, that kind of brings me to the end of the program stuff, if you want to call it that, in terms of the center wings. I think I wanted to spend a bit more time on that. And also captaincy. I think captaincy was obviously a big talking point this week. I'll quickly just flick across to my team. You guys probably haven't seen it for a little bit. Just so you guys what I'm currently dealing with and what I'm thinking about. So I've got 2 trades in the bank at this stage, 243k. VC Hines, Captain Ponga. Don't see myself going off that. Now, coming into this week, I was hoping to actually bench Garrick because it's a really tough matchup against Penrith. Even though it's a home game, I just don't see things going too well for Garrick. And so ideally I was going to play Munro over Garrick. But that still gave me an issue of my 4th reserve's probably not going to be that strong this week. Like Munster, SJ, Marzu are fine. But then the fourth is either going to be like a Reed Miney, Christian Welch, maybe Brendan Piakura, but he's been benched. I bought Russell from the Dragons last week actually as well, just as a downgrade from John Bateman. He actually ended up scoring like 68, although I think that did include a try assist, which I'm not expecting from him most weeks. So my initial thought coming into this week was to hold, but I think with the not being so happy, I guess, about my 17th player, I'm thinking maybe I can use this as an opportunity to move off Nico Klukstad. My preference would be to hold CNK just with a really good draw run home, but thinking that if we get news that he's out maybe more than this week and it's the next couple of weeks, then I might just look to potentially trade him out. If I did trade him out with the amount of money in the bank and actually the duel that I have, I can go a little bit of a pod and go someone like a Tino. So I can trade, like Garrick to here. I've got Russell, trade him down here. Trade one of Tohu to my second row forward. And I can actually go like Tino on one move, and that still leaves me like 93k in the bank. I have dabbled with that, but then I thought, is Tino really the guy who's going to give me that really big score to kind of get me flying up those rankings? I'm not sure, and at 800k for a front row forward does feel like a lot of money. So I think I'm probably not going to do any trades this week. It's mainly just around Nico Klukstad, and then I'd probably play Reed Mine, who's got the Knights, who can be leaky at stages. Hopefully Munro, if we get some news about him, I definitely want to play him against Dragons over Garrick, so hopefully find that out before Thursday, ideally. If I do decide to sell Nico Klukstad, though, it probably won't be for Tino. It would probably be for maybe it would probably be for a centre wing option, and I think I'd probably go someone like a Gagai. I think it's a bit of a pod, so I'd probably just flip Garrick down to my fullback, and I'd probably bring in Gagai in that way. And he's been on fire, really solid base as well. Good matchup this week as well against the Bulldogs. A trade like that still leaves me 215k in the bank, which is enough for hopefully I'd have one trade left at that point. And I would just be saving that for potentially round 26 when the Rabbitohs are on the bye. Maybe selling someone like a Damien Cook to Harry Grant if I don't want to play Reed Marnie, or just using that trade as a bit of a safety net for if there's any Panthers rests in round 27. So that's my initial thoughts for this week. Very 50-50 on Nico Klukstad. I think the way that I'm thinking about it, just with my rank, I'm kind of thinking just to keep going for it maybe, and just trade him out and get like a Gagai instead. So I'd probably say I'm 55-45 selling him over holding him at this stage. And if I did sell him, it'd probably be for Gagai, and that would probably be my likely move for this week. But let me know what you guys think as well, if there's anything else you think I should consider. But let's get into your questions now as well. We're at 54 minutes, which I'm surprised about. I thought I would actually be going shorter than that this week, but you guys know I like to ramble. But yeah, do give the stream a like if you enjoyed it. And start dropping your questions in. We'll spend about 5-10 minutes on questions. I do want to make sure I get to a few of them this week, kind of to make up for the last 2 weeks as well, not being available. CNK to Gagai or DWZ. Already have Marzu. Is it okay to own both edges of the Knights? Lola. So I did quite a deep dive just previously on the center wing. Do rewind and see if you can listen to that section as well, because I do actually put a ranking together of the options. Of those two, I probably just slightly rank Gagai over DWZ. DWZ's matchups over the next 4 just scream that that right wing spot is the place to be. My only potential concern is that if Nico Klukstad is out for more than this week, does that affect Dallin? And I think there's a risk that it does, whereas Gagai is pretty much risk-free. I think he's going to give you minimum 55, 60 points a week, has a chance to go 80, 90 very often as well. Isako from Tour Pro. Yeah, Isako obviously scored really well last week. I sold Isako last week, which obviously stung a little bit because I had a good score. If I held on to him, I could have done even better. But I did sell him for someone for Dallin, just to try to prioritize the Warriors. The way that the team's been named this week is Cody's at fullback, Hamiso at centre. If Cody goes back to centre, I think that is good for Isako, but I don't know. I feel like with Isako, a lot of people were selling him last week because he was been really poor. Obviously, the big score from him last week helps, but a break even of 12 is good. Tigers the week after next is also good too. Yeah, look, I don't mind Isako, but just be wary that, if you look at his scores before that, not the best. Whereas I think someone like a Gagai probably trust him a little bit more over Isako, I think, over the run home. is Fafita, Azeyo, Hopgood, Ford, and Nikora good to our rest of the run home? That's a very deep second or forward. I think you'll be just fine with that. Fagnado, like Fafita is a permanent play. Ford with his matchups, you can probably play every week. Nikora, you could probably play in Sharks better matchups, like for example this week. Hopgood is also like a guy you can play every week as well. And you've got good coverage because Hopgood obviously misses round 27, but Azeyo could also rest round 27, but you still have 3 good second row forwards. So I think your second row forwards are pretty set. Cardi Party, Bryce Cartwright. Yep, the man who I wish I started with over Matt Dury. Matt Dury is still on my team, and he'll be there all season long, unbelievably. If I look at my squad, I think there's only 2 players who I've had all the way through from round 1 of this year. One is Matt Dury, and the other, somehow, is Christian Welch. I don't know how, but these 2 have just hung around my team all season long, and they're probably going to stay there. So congrats to those 2. You've made it all the way through my team. Last season was only a few like dual bags. Somehow Matt Dury's made his way through for the rest of the season. But yeah, Cartwright obviously killed it last week. Scored a double. 65 in base as well, so a really big 127. I mean, he's been killing it all season. Would I buy him now though? Probably not, just because of that buy round 27. I think I'd probably prefer, Pat Carrigan's been killing it, although he's got a buy next week, so I probably don't love that either. I'd probably still stick with some of the more, someone like a Jackson Ford with a really good run home. For Fafita, I'd probably prefer. Still, I think Britton Nikora is a really good option too. So, there's a big score from Cardi Party last week, but I don't mind it. If you just want to have fun, just go for him. Broncos away is tough at the Gabba. Roosters next week is probably good at Combank. Panthers is tough, but he is a forward, and he's scoring well in base. Like 65 base last week is his highest base of the season by far, actually. So a bit of an anomaly in that sense, but yeah. Could be a nice little fun option, but I don't know if he'd be someone I'm looking to actively buy this week. Probably mentioned before, but it's Tungo a hold. Tough, really, really tough one because we don't have any good news. We don't have any really news on him as to whether he's actually back soon or not. So I think kind of depends on your situation, Alex. Are you in a head-to-head and you need to kind of, go for that win this week, or are you playing overall and you can afford to hold? He's 723k. He's a lot of money. Not playing this week. I'd probably lean just to sell him, I think, at this point. Just go for someone like a To'o. You got Gagai, you got Mazu, you got Manu. You got a lot of options there. So I kind of think, I'd probably sell at this point. Hamish says, when need to make trades this round? Have 3 remaining. Not sure what to prioritize. Simkin has ruined my VC loop. CNK out indefinitely, and also an AJ who misses the head-to-head grand final. So in terms of prioritizing what you need to do, Hamish, Simkin, yes, sure he ruins a VC loop, but burning a valuable trade on that, I don't know if that's the answer. It would probably be for maybe more like CNK or AJ. AJ don't even have to trade this week, obviously, as you're not doing. Priority, I think, would be CNK. He's the most value, and we're not confident, I guess, on when he'll be back. Should I play Meany over Olukwatu and Garrick? So I'm going to quickly refer back to the try map just to see how that looks for Meany against Canberra. Canberra have been leaky against fullbacks, 14 tries to fullbacks, which is actually equal worse on their team, equal with the right wing. So it's a good matchup for Meany. I definitely play Meany over Garrick. I think you can play him over Olukwatu as well. Olukwatu's been pretty solid, actually. He's another second or forward that you guys could consider. I think he scored 79 last week. He's got a 3-round average of 77 actually as well. But it is a tough matchup against Penrith, so I kind of think with Penrith you can maybe look to bench. I'd be happy playing Meany. His goal kicking could be a really good matchup with some upside. Play Nikora, Madison, or Garrick. Probably Nikora. I think he's got the best matchup of those 3. Madison back on the bench isn't fantastic. Nikora against the Titans, I'd like to play him. And as we spoke about a bit before, Titans have been leaky in the middle. I know he's on an edge, but he can run a line through the middle, I guess. So it's potentially an option for Nikora to do well this week. Tanner Boyd to Grant. Tanner Boyd, low-key, I think has actually had some good scores, but I think if you can get to Grant, I like that move. Tough run home for the Titans. Grant is Grant. Yeah, I like that as an upgrade. Is it bad to own both Tina and Fafito? God, Nice word jumble there, Aman. Tina and Fafita. Not quite. Tino and Fafita. Want to upgrade Bateman. Yeah, look, Bateman hasn't been good. I sold him last week. I definitely prefer Tino and Fafita. I don't see any issues having those two on your team. Both independently, I think, good options. And, I don't see them getting rested in the run home. Especially with Tino. He's just come back off from 3-game suspension. Best head-to-head centre wing. Best head-to-head centre wing. So you'll be looking specifically at the next 3, which I think would be... I think over the next 3, someone like... probably, someone like a Dallin or Manu, potentially. Because you've got... Manu would have Dolphins this week and West Tigers in your head-to-head grand final and Parramatta. Dallin would have Tigers, Manly and Dragons in your head-to-head grand final. Probably say one of those two if I had to think of a head-to-head centre wing. There's no team who has like a standout next 3 games, but it's probably the Warriors if anyone. So yeah, probably Dallin. Tungo to Toto sideways. I don't think so because Toto's available and playing, and we've spoken about the matchup against Manly. It looks really good this week. So I think that's a good move this week, to be honest. Do I play Karaz, Mulatalo or Tavare? Probably not Tavare. The Roosters have been leaky, but I think they'll do well this week. Karaz or Mulatalo? I think I'd play Mulatalo. I think I'd try to fancy that matchup against the Titans. How am I going in my head-to-head comps? I'm out of all of them. I'm actually not really in that many leagues. I think I'm only in like 3 leagues. So I'm not really too focused on head-to-head, to be honest. All right, we'll take 2 more questions, and I think we'll wrap it up there. Brendan says, hey, man, loved your work all season. Thank you very much. I can bring in Walker or Manu this round. It's sudden death, so you really need a big score this week. So we have to think about who do you think will score more this week, Walker or Manu. So Dragons have conceded 9 tries to the left half opposition. Dolphins, 11 tries to right centres. Tough one. Very, very tough one. I kind of think Manu, to be honest. I don't know. I'm kind of thinking Manu. Like, Walker is just kind of gone off the boil a little bit, with the Rabbitohs decline as well. Threw around average of only 54, I should say, sorry. Like, even he only scored 58 against Tigers as well. I'm kind of thinking Manu, to be honest. That's kind of where my gut's leaning, Brendan. All right, last question here. We'll take it from Albert, which is trading Pia Kura to Fanul Blake, Nico Klukside to DWZ, Drinkwater to Teddy. Don't mind that as a boost, to be honest. A couple of nice pods there, I think, in DWZ and Teddy. And AFB, I think, is a good option as well. With the Warriors, good draw. Definitely has a chance of good attacking stats. Alrighty, I think we'll wrap up the stream there. We've gone over about just a little bit over an hour. Hopefully you all enjoyed that. And you enjoyed me being back on your screens as well. Good to be back talking footy. I will not be able to do a roundup stream, I think, this week. I'm actually going to Brisbane for a couple of days just over the weekend. So I don't think I come back until late on Sunday. So I won't be able to do a roundup stream, unfortunately. We'll try to do something if I can. Might be able to do a Q&A stream on Thursday, but we'll see how the demand is for that. But yeah, hopefully you all enjoyed. Do please give the stream a like on the way out. If you did enjoy it, really does help me out. And yeah, great to be back talking SuperCoach. So thank you all for tuning in, and catch you in the next one. See ya.